We're under fire. We're under fire. He's got an automatic weapon. He's firing out of the front of the synagogue.
Horror in Pittsburgh as a maniac fueled by hate opens fire on worshipers. 11 people are dead. At least 4 police officers are injured.
The suspect reportedly yelled, "All Jews must die," before he opened fire.
This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on humanity. We must draw a line in the sand and say very strongly, never again.
The migrants continue to march north. They believe they have a right to continue their march for asylum to the United States.
Republicans want strong borders, no crime, and no caravans, right? Turn around. You're not coming in.
The president covered a range of topics, everything from NAFTA to immigration, jobs.
We're fighting to win, and that's what you have to do.
We begin with a Fox News alert. It's the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in U.S. history. 11 dead, 6 injured, including 4 police officers, after a shooter opens fire inside a synagogue.
The face of evil, right there. 46-year-old Robert Bowers now charged with 29 federal counts, including hate crimes, after surrendering to police.
Chilling dispatch audio of the shootout with first responders has now been released.
We're under fire. We're under fire. He's got an automatic weapon. He's firing out of the front of the synagogue. Every available unit in the city needs to get here now. All units hold a perimeter. We're taking on AK-47 fire from out the front of the synagogue. Please send the medics up here.
Just chilling. David Lee Miller is live in Pittsburgh, where we're learning more about the suspect's background. Good morning, David.
Good morning. It is a cold and rainy morning here in Pittsburgh, and this is a city that is soon going to be waking up to a very different place than it was just 24 hours ago. This is a city that is mourning now. As you mentioned, the Anti-Defamation League is now saying it is likely that what happened here almost 24 hours ago was the deadliest attack against the Jewish community in the United States. The alleged shooter, 46-year-old Robert Bowers, faces dozens of federal and state charges. During the attack, before and after, he made a number of anti-Semitic remarks. Police said that he admitted to saying, quote, "These Jews need to die," after he was taken into custody. Last night, a U.S. magistrate here signed a federal complaint for 29 counts, including 11 charges of obstruction of exercise of religious beliefs, resulting in death. Bowers will also face 11 state charges on homicide. Pennsylvania has a moratorium on the death penalty, but federal prosecution could result in his execution. President Trump is soon planning a trip to Pittsburgh. Speaking at a rally last night in Illinois, he talked about attackers in this type of situation and said they must face the most severe consequences.
When you have crimes like this, whether it's this one or another one on another group, we have to bring back the death penalty. They have to pay the ultimate price.
And as the investigation continues, the healing process here is just getting underway. Last night, thousands attended a vigil for the victims of the shooting. The deadly rampage took a toll in a section of the city called Squirrel Hill, but many came from all around to express their grief.
I just can't believe the kind of violence that we're experiencing in our country. And I have close friends who worship in Squirrel Hill, and when I found out about the news today, it just made me nauseous and tearful, and I just came tonight to show my support.
It is expected that later today, authorities are going to release the names of those who died, and then very soon, the first of 11 funerals will take place as this city begins the process of mourning. Back to you.
Very tough morning in Pittsburgh. David Lee Miller, appreciate that report. We talked about it yesterday. In recent days, critics of the president have been going after him about, you know, the mail bombs and all of the rest. And I thought the president struck a really good tone yesterday in saying this is unspeakable evil. and it simply cannot happen in America. And he had this political rally scheduled in Illinois, and he said some on his staff were debating, should we cancel this or not? And he compared it to 9/11 and what happened here in the New York City area, and people were saying, we got to keep the stock market closed for a while, we need to stay back. And he said, no, people in New York City, people at the stock exchange, Dick Grasso and others said, we need to get it going. We can't let this kind of evil win.
That's right. So he was at a rally yesterday, and we're going to play some more comments. David Lee Miller had a few. He talked about this sheer anti-Semitic attack. Listen.
The hearts of all Americans are filled with grief following the monstrous killing of Jewish Americans at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You've all seen it. This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It will require all of us working together to extract the hateful poison of anti-Semitism from our world. The scourge of anti-Semitism cannot be ignored, cannot be tolerated, and it cannot be allowed to continue. We can't make these sick, demented, evil people important. And when we change all of our lives in order to accommodate them, it's not acceptable. This is the time to renew the bonds of love and loyalty that hold us all together as Americans. These bonds have always sustained our nation in its hour of need. They are always more powerful than the forces of hatred and division, anger and evil.
Well, the president couldn't be more unequivocal about how evil this is, his thoughts on it. He was very clear denouncing this anti-Semitism, something that probably is very personal to him. He has a daughter or son-in-law who are Jewish.
Absolutely.
And yet some people could not resist the temptation of blaming President Trump. We have here a quote from Joe Biden. Hate is on the march in America, and when hatred is given a safe harbor, when it's given space to fester, when it's brazenly put itself on display in an historic city, when its distorted worldview is fueled uninterrupted in the form after form on the web, when it hears an American political leadership say good people can be found among those spewing this ugly bile, it grows.
So make no mistake about it. I mean, and it's not just Joe Biden. Steny Hoyer, a bunch of other Democrats basically said, this is Trump's fault. This is where I think we need to take a pause. Not everything that happens is political. Yeah. Some things are just sheer evil. I mean, the reports are that this shooter hates Trump, believes Trump is controlled by Jews. And we should think about this for Christians. This is like someone walking into church on Sunday. I mean, Shabbat is the holy day for Jews on Saturday. This is like walking into your local church on Sunday and shooting people up. I mean, the bravery of law enforcement is what we should be holding up.
Could have been so much worse.
Oh, my goodness, it could have been so much worse. But to impugn the motives of the other, I say a lot of things about stopping illegal immigration, refugee. Doesn't mean I hate illegal immigrants or hate people who are proponents for them. It means I disagree on the policy or the way it should happen. When you say that Donald Trump is hatred or spews hate, you're devolving down to a place where anything is justified to be said about that.
We're charging
person.
He's giving it safe harbor.
Exactly.
What was the statement?
Well, and also there's evil, and there's also just plain crazy. I mean, the guy with the van and the pipe bombs. I mean, this sounds like somebody who was clearly unstable, probably had some meltdown from taking steroids on his brain. I mean, we just can't always, as you say, Pete, very wisely, we can't attribute everything to politics.
Yep.
And it seems like we're in this bubble, this environment now where everything is being taken advantage for political advantage.
And as we mentioned at the top, we expect the president at some point in the next few days, when it's appropriate, is planning to go to Pittsburgh to express his sympathy, his concerns about all of this. Obviously, the timing is very difficult. You've got a midterm election less than 2 weeks away right now. Politics is going on right now. You've seen those attacks on the president, as we just mentioned. He's trying in those comments that we saw at the rally to stay above the fray. And there are a lot of big issues. Pete just mentioned illegal immigration as well. And that's where we turn to another Fox News alert, the migrant caravan, which is still marching toward our southern border, ready to defy U.S. immigration laws.
Wow, many of them now turning down Mexico's offer for asylum.
Griff Jenkins is live with the caravan in southern Mexico. Griff, good morning.
Good morning, guys. We're in San Pedro Tapanetepec, and it's about 200 miles north of that U.S.-Guatemala border. But look at the scene behind me. It looks like it could be a possible day of rest for the migrants. They're here in the town square sound asleep, and I'm going to bring you around here and walk you the entire distance. It's just bodies everywhere, and clearly this is taking a toll. Now, the organizing group, Pueblo Sin Fronteras, usually they are up at 3 a.m. marching to the next location. They want to avoid the heat of the day, but they announced very late last night that they were having a 10 a.m. press conference here today. And we were also hearing that really the toll on this group is becoming quite strong, because we're hearing multiple reports of children being abducted. We're hearing that there have been some attempts amongst some of the younger ones in this group to rob others. These are reports that are coming out with local reporters and amongst the people we are talking to here as well. And of course, we have the medical folks here treating people that are continuing to get sick. Now, when we talk to these people about whether or not they're heeding President Trump's words about not coming, and that they will be violating the laws if they do try and come, and that they will not be given asylum, they say they're coming regardless. In fact, we talked to one of them yesterday when we were in a halt, when we were trapped yesterday, actually, as the Mexican police were stopping people from getting to this location. This gentleman, Carlos, I said, "Are you still going to come, even if it means breaking the law?" Here's what he told me. Will you continue to the United States?
Yes. Problem is the babies and ladies. Yeah. The people, men, no problem. This problem the babies.
So we're going to, as they begin to wake up, talk to them again today and see if they're really intending to break the law, or whether or not they'll accept Mexico's offer, claim asylum, and get Peña Nieto's offer of temporary work, health care, and some shelter. Guys?
Wow. My heart breaks for those little babies that are brought on that journey.
Griff, great work. And we're also hearing, this week we might hear a proposal from the administration to take a pretty hard line on whether they come in or not.
All right.
All right, we're going to turn quickly to some headlines. The man accused of sending more than a dozen suspicious packages to prominent Democrats is expected in court tomorrow. Investigators say the van Cesar Sayoc was living in has crucial evidence like explosive device materials and credit card receipts. Authorities arrested Sayoc in South Florida and are looking for other suspects in the area who may have helped him. Steve Harrigan will join us live from Miami in about 10 minutes with the very latest. Now to extreme weather, a nasty nor'easter slamming the East Coast, leaving thousands without power. Heavy rain triggering severe coastal flooding from New Jersey to Long Island, even shutting down roads. Winds reaching up to 67 miles per hour, stirring up a sandstorm in Massachusetts. The storm is now headed up towards eastern Canada.
All right, we pick up the baseball news. The Boston Red Sox rally for the LA Dodgers. Meanwhile, President Trump weighing in, tweeting, "Watching the Dodgers-Red Sox final innings, it is amazing how a manager takes out a pitcher who is loose and dominating through almost 7 innings, Rich Hill of the Dodgers, and brings in nervous relievers who get shellacked. 4-run lead gone. Managers do it all the time. Big mistake." Dodgers manager Dave Roberts had to actually respond to the president. Watch.
I'm happy he was tuning in and watching the game. I don't think he is privy to the conversation. That's one man's opinion.
Wow. It's one fan's opinion.
Yeah, he's the president. Boston can win their first championship since 2013 with a win in Game 5 tonight on Fox. The context says that Dave Roberts has been hammered even before that game on some of his moves back in Boston. Sometimes he just goes with the book, what the data tells him. And I think with the president's point, a lot of baseball fans agree with the president, Democrat or Republican, that you got to go with your gut sometimes. And a pitcher is striking people out. Don't worry about the stats.
It's about a feel.
Leave the pitcher in there.
That's great.
Again, politics and infesting everything.
All right, well, up next, they walked away from the Democratic Party.
Realize what the left has been telling us has been a total lie.
Now, they just walked their first ever march in D.C. to celebrate. We're going to take you there. Opened fire during Sabbath prayer services. Johnny Daniels is president of From the Depths, a group aimed at teaching future generations lessons of the Holocaust. He joins us now. It's Shabbat. Sorry, I butchered it. Talk to us about when you see something like this in Pittsburgh. What does it mean to you?
I mean, you know, I've got to start by obviously expressing my condolences to the families and to the community. But it was just such a horribly tragic thing to happen. You know, this is people who are going to worship in synagogue. They're going with their families, they're going with their kids. I go every Shabbat with my children to the synagogue. And the notion that a crazed man can come in and open fire and brutally murder so many people is just so horrendous. And watching this around the world, you know, and seeing this hatred that's happening here, you know, this isn't what we want to see, and this is horrifying for us all.
He may have been he was crazy at some level, but he also had hate in his heart for Jews. I mean, where does this anti-Semitism continue to come from?
Well, look, I mean, I think that anti-Semitism, as we know, is an epidemic that's across the world, and, you know, we're seeing it on the rise today in Europe. You know, we're seeing countries like Germany and France and Belgium and Sweden, countries that are really not that safe to be Jewish anymore. You know, I'm originally from the United Kingdom, where we could potentially elect an anti-Semite as a head of a political party. You know, this is very, very, very problematic and scary at the moment. And we are seeing a rise. We're seeing a rise in hate speech, and we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitic rhetoric. And I think a lot of this has to do with social media and a lack of willing of certain social media sites to combat these kinds of hate speech. But we all have to stand together against any kind of racism or bigotism or whatever it may be.
You run an organization from the depths committed to remembering what happened in the past. How much of forgetting our history contributes to this new rise in anti-Semitism?
Well, you know, again, I'm dealing on a daily basis in sort of Eastern Europe and in different countries, and we're seeing the messages of these past, and you're seeing these lessons. You know, we work with Holocaust survivors and the righteous, those who saved Holocaust survivors, and you hear these stories again and again, and you see that the anti-Semitism started on a rise, and it wasn't combated strongly enough. And I think that what we're seeing now, and this hate speech ultimately does lead to death, and this really needs to be fought against.
For people that don't have an ounce of anti-Semitism in their heart,
right,
where does that come from? Where does this reoccurring desire to point to the Jews and say, you're evil, where does it come from?
Well, I mean, look, unfortunately, a lot of it is educational, and a lot of it is you know, institutional. You know, in a lot of countries, there is most definitely institutional anti-Semitism, and historically, Jews have been a scapegoat, right? So if something goes wrong in a country, you're going to blame a minority, as we often see, and the minority in Europe often happened to be the Jew, and this unfortunately continued. And this whole notion that you know, this control and all of this stuff, this is so much of this hatred that is just so unnecessary.
Well, it's scary that you once again we're revisiting this in Europe, the place that just seven decades ago committed these heinous acts. Johnny Daniels, president of From the Depths. You're keeping the Holocaust alive, making sure people remember it. Today is an important reminder of that as well. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Good stuff. Tough day. All right, still ahead. A madman murders 11 Jews at a place of worship. But it's Donald Trump that the left is calling evil. Dr. Sebastian Gorka is here to react. Plus, in another story, the migrant caravan refusing medical benefits from Mexico as they push closer to the U.S. So what challenges could this pose to our hospitals? We're going to ask Dr. Nicole Saphier next.
Morning, and we're back with the Fox News alert. The man accused of sending suspicious packages to prominent Democrats might have had some help. Steve Harrigan joins us live from Miami, where the feds are searching for some possible suspects. Steve, good morning.
That's right. Good morning. The FBI is saying this case is clearly not over. The investigation is ongoing, and they are pouring over that white van. That's the place where Cesar Sayoc, the 56-year-old man accused of sending 14 pipe bombs to prominent Democrats and critics of President Trump, lived actually for the last several years, and where he may have constructed some of those pipe bombs. They're also pouring over his digital footprint to see if possibly anyone else could have been involved in these attacks or influenced Sayoc. We are also learning more about Sayoc from his family members who are beginning to speak to the media. His aunt said the following: I think he was very troubled. I think he had a problem with his mental health and that he was mentally challenged. He wanted attention and he didn't know how to get it. Sayoc, of course, has a lengthy criminal record, at least 12 arrests here in southern Florida for fraud, drugs, and theft. Right now, he's in a detention center here in Miami. He goes before a federal judge Monday before being transferred to New York. He could be facing up to 48 years in prison. Back to you.
Big case. Thank you, Steve Harrigan. We appreciate the reporting. Rachel?
Thank you, Ed. A Fox News alert: the mass of caravan migrants now refusing major benefits like jobs, schooling, and even medical attention that's being offered by Mexico, and instead pushing onwards to the United States. And our next guest warning that the potential influx of thousands of migrants' medical needs will overwhelm local hospitals as well as taxpayers' wallets. Here to explain, physician and diagnostic radiologist Dr. Nicole Saphier, who has worked in a border state hospital. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So let's first start with, I saw the images this morning from Griff. You know, they're sleeping on the floor. They're about 7,000 strong, we think. What kinds of medical risks are they encountering just as they move forward on this caravan?
I mean, this journey is an incredible journey, and it has huge physical implications for their health. Dehydration, kidney failure. They're being treated constantly for wounds on their feet, which obviously can be subject to infections, unmanaged their own disease processes like diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So as they continue to move on, it's a very precarious and unhealthy, potentially unhealthy situation for a lot of these people.
Yeah, in fact, they were saying, one of the people he interviewed said, you know, we think some of the men will make it. The people with little children might not make it because it is just so grueling. Now, once they arrive, if they make it across the border, you've worked in a border hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. What are, and they don't have insurance once they get here, so what are the implications? What are the pressures that it puts on our medical system here in the United States?
Of course. So I'm born and raised in Arizona, and I did the far majority of my training in Arizona and at the county hospital nonetheless. And I've seen a lot of treatment of a lot of our illegal immigrants that come. And it takes a lot of care for these patients, because I have seen so many patients that cross the border illegally, not on a publicized, televised journey, a trek where they have medical stations along the way. And it is an extremely costly to care for these patients, and there's no funding for that. So it is all unpaid care, and unless you're offsetting that with private insurers or federal funding, that causes a lot of these rural hospitals to really have to tighten their financial strains, and you have some going bankrupt and having to close. And you know, if you're going to have a large influx in illegal immigrants and not have the funding to cover them, then it's going to strain their systems even more.
Yeah, you're right. Some have shut down in Arizona. That's something that people don't hear too often about. Vaccines, that's a problem, because some of these people are not, or majority probably are not vaccinated.
A large amount of the children that would be coming over in the caravan are not vaccinated, and if they're coming into the system and they're not appropriately treated by U.S. physicians, then they may be subjecting our children to some of the risk of being around unvaccinated children.
Okay, I want to get quickly to sexual assaults. It's something that's been really on my heart a lot. 30% of the girls are sexually assaulted. Almost 20% of boys and young men are being sexually assaulted. We're seeing young girls coming across the border in the early stages of pregnancy. What are doctors seeing as they cross the border with regard to the medical and psychological needs?
Well, my mother works in sex trafficking, a lot that has to do with the southwest border, so I hear about it constantly from her. But one of the cases that really I hold true to my heart, when I was in training, I had a 22-year-old pregnant girl who crossed the desert, who stayed in the ICU for 3 weeks, lost the baby, and lost her own life, and it was devastating. And sexual assault is extremely prevalent. We've already been hearing that there are cases of the children potentially being abducted from this caravan. We don't know what's happening to those children. And let me tell you, by the time they get here, they will have physical and mental damage that's going to need to be cared for, and it's going to be expensive. And we already have a bankrupting healthcare system. We can't afford it at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Saphier.
Thank you for having me.
Very
important topic.
Important topic that's not getting enough attention, so thank you. All right. A madman murders 11 people in a place of worship, but Howard Dean says it's Donald Trump who is evil.
This has now become a struggle about good versus evil, and the President of the United States is evil.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka is here to react next. Plus, what did the voters think of President Trump's rally last night? Todd Pyro is having breakfast with friends in Illinois. We'll check in with him. Todd's coming up next.
And it was late.
We are back with a Fox News alert. 11 are dead and 6 others injured, including 4 police officers after a shooter opens fire inside a busy synagogue in Pittsburgh.
It's a very horrific crime scene. It's one of the worst that I've seen, and I've been on some plane crashes. It's very bad.
46-year-old Robert Bowers now charged with 29 federal counts, including hate crimes. Bowers surrendering to police after the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in U.S. history.
Let's bring in Dr. Sebastian Gorka, of course, Fox News national security strategist, former deputy assistant to the president, author of the new book, Why We Fight. defeating America's enemies with no apologies. Good to have you here, Dr. Gorka.
Thanks, Ed.
Obviously, the book undoubtedly focuses on our enemies around the world, but when you see a case like this of just unspeakable horror, there are some enemies from within, unfortunately and tragically as well, it seems.
Absolutely, absolutely. This tragedy proves to us yet again that anti-Semitism is alive and well, and we have to be on our guard to pick up the signs early, to find people that are going to act on it like this heinous individual, and to intercept them before they can actually do violence. So
at President Trump and say, you know, it's an environment of hate that has led to this. What do you say to folks that make that claim?
First, I'd like to point out the facts to them. Donald Trump's grandchildren are Orthodox Jews. His daughter converted to Judaism. Donald Trump is the first president in 23 years to keep our nation's promise to the people of Israel and to recognize Jerusalem as its capital and to move our embassy. So those are the facts. The only thing that is evil in this instance is the man who perpetrated this massacre and the anti-Semitism that he was propagating. Also, note that we now know from his social media that the perpetrator of this massacre hated the president as well. So we've got to stop the people who are exploiting tragedy for their own political purposes.
Now, Dr. Gorka, before the shooting, former DNC chair Howard Dean had this to say about Donald Trump.
Evil lurks in the hearts of men. The Democrats have made plenty of mistakes, but they are about the future and idealism and making America a better place. This has now become a struggle about good versus evil, and the President of the United States is evil.
Your reaction?
Howard who? The most irrelevant man, the most laughable character in American politics for the last generation. It's unconscionable to talk about Donald Trump, who helped defeat ISIS in the form of its caliphate, an individual who's taken all kinds of slings and arrows for the American people, and who's it beggars belief that people like Howard Dean still think they're relevant and are insulting the President of the United States. I'll tell you what's evil. It's people who exploit tragedy for their own purposes, and also the man who perpetrated this crime.
Doctor,
anything else?
When you call someone evil, it justifies whatever means you want to use to defeat that person.
Right. You are dehumanizing. This man, Dean, is dehumanizing a person who is the duly elected President of the United States. And his comments could lead crazy people to do things we don't even want to talk about.
Dr. Gorka, important words this morning. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're going to turn now to your headlines. Tragedy rocking the professional soccer world this morning. We now know the billionaire owner of the UK's Leicester City Football Club was on board his helicopter when it crashed, exploding into a fireball just steps from the team stadium. Players and fans watching in horror as flames and smoke shot into the sky after the team's match last night. No word on who else was on board. 4 Jacksonville Jaguars players detained by London police because they didn't pay their bar tab. The players have not been named by authorities. The Jaguars are overseas to play the Philadelphia Eagles in about 3 hours. The team says it's handling the issue internally, and all 4 players are still with the team.
And Pete Hegseth had no comment.
Hundreds of supporters turning out in the rain for the first ever walk-away march in Washington, D.C. They're part of a new movement. We had the leader on yesterday of fed-up Democrats who say they're sick of being manipulated by the left and are throwing their support behind Republicans this November.
The media do not want you to know that a black person doesn't hate white people. Realize what the left has been telling us has been a total lie.
The red, white, and blue-clad demonstrators walked the streets in MAGA hats, draped in American flags.
Very cool.
All right, you got to check your Powerball tickets because at least one person is waking up a millionaire this morning. 2 tickets have won the the $750 million jackpot. Those winning numbers are 12, 13, 19, 27, and the Powerball 4. One of the tickets sold in Iowa, the other in New York. I heard it was in Harlem.
I bought one yesterday. Not in Harlem. Okay.
The jackpot is the 4th largest in U.S. history. And those are your headlines, guys.
All right.
Crazy. All right, well, the midterms now just over a week away. So what happens if Democrats win back Congress? Our next guest explains how it could spell disaster for our military.
And remember when LeBron James stumped for Hillary Clinton? Now the NBA star is putting his star power behind another Democrat. Didn't work out last time. Who's the new mystery Democrat? That's coming up.
Now to some quick headlines, Hollywood edition. LeBron James is taking a shot at politics, arriving in San Antonio donning a Beto for Senate hat. The Los Angeles Laker weighing in on one of the most heated Senate races of the midterm, supporting the liberal candidate fighting to unseat Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Considering the Lakers are 2-4, maybe he should pay attention there. And funny man Will Ferrell hitting the trail in Georgia, door knocking and recruiting volunteers for Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams.
Hi, it's Will Ferrell. I'm here in Kennesaw State, home of the Owls. We're trying to get people to volunteer with Stacey Abrams.
Abrams is neck and neck with her opponent, President Trump-endorsed Republican Brian Kemp. We'll see if these celebrities weighing in actually works, Ed.
Didn't work out in 2016, you're right, Pete. Since President Trump took office, his administration has given strong support for the U.S. military. You've seen that again and again, even signing an over $700 billion defense policy bill back in August that boosted military pay by the most in 9 years. But what will happen if the so-called blue wave washes over Washington? Let's ask former advisor on military matters for the Hill, Rebecca Heinrichs, now a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we've heard this idea, though, that maybe the blue wave is not all it was cracked up to be. Might that be good news for the U.S. military?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't really pay too much attention to polls. I think it's kind of hard to tell at this point. But if Democrats take back even one chamber, just the House of Representatives, for instance, and gain back the majority, it's going to be much more difficult for President Trump to get through his agenda. And that includes a sufficient spending, funding, and resourcing our national defense. Democrats are going to try to obstruct a lot of what the president is trying to do. And Democrats tend not to prioritize and invest in the military like Republicans do. Democrats tend to look at things like health care, Social Security, the things that are actually ballooning federal spending. So that's what we're looking at here. If the Democrats take back even just at the House, we're going to have a hard time getting through a good, sufficient defense spending bill.
And that's not just political rhetoric. These are the facts as you lay them out. And I wanted to show our viewers what the Congressional Progressive Caucus, what their military blueprint is. This is what they say if they'll take back the House. They vowed a very different path from the president. They will cut the Pentagon budget. That's pretty clear. Eliminate overseas contingency spending and, quote, achieve smaller force structure through gradual attrition. This is what the president said was happening under President Obama when he took office, and that he's wanted to reverse. That General Mattis came into the Pentagon and said, people are not going to like it, but we've got to spend money and build the military back up with all these threats from around the world.
That's right. And the thing is, nobody disagrees that we have a ballooning debt. It's just that it's Social Security and it's health care and it's the interest on the debt that is actually driving the debt. It's not the military. The military national defense is a priority. This is what Congress is supposed to do, number one, before we do anything else. And so if we actually are going to engage in fewer wars and deter these big wars from countries like China and Russia, we have to invest in not only military capabilities that we have in greater quantities, but also invest in the technology so that we can be superior, not on par with, but superior in all warfighting domains, including in space. That requires money, and we got to fund that first before we fund anything else.
You mentioned investing in our men and women in uniform. You've got investors in Wall Street thinking about cold hard cash, if you will, and they want to know who's going to control the House, who's going to control the Senate. And we looked at it. Credit Suisse put together an analysis of what's going to happen to shares of weapons manufacturers manufacturers. They say if the Democrats take the House, it'll be down by 2%, down 3% or more if Democrats win both the House and Senate. And then here you have shares of weapons manufacturers under the Republicans up 3% or more if the Republicans can retain control in 2018. That's the view from Wall Street. And I wonder, though, wouldn't critics say that's because there are a lot of Republicans who want to make money off of building up the military? How would you respond to that criticism?
Yeah, I would just say, again, this is the government's first responsibility. You know, we always hear complaints about the military-industrial complex. They're just in it for profit. Of course, you're going to have companies that are trying to make money, but we use these technologies to ensure that the United States, again, is the world's superpower, and so that we're not having to engage and constantly react to conflicts abroad. We have adversaries coming from all angles, and if the United States doesn't want to get embroiled in another one of these protracted wars like we have in the Middle East, you've got to have a military that is second to none. You have to have war fighters that are optimistic and have great morale, and all of that requires a healthy military budget.
Well, just another example of the big stakes just over a week from now in those midterm elections. Rebecca Heinrichs, we appreciate how you broke it all down so clearly.
Thanks.
All right, good seeing you. Meanwhile, he's making a big last-minute push to become the newest senator from Michigan. And now, John James has this message from the African-American community. Watch.
The Democratic Party leadership cares more about the black vote than the black people. And it's time to wake up. Selma to New York.
Well, Senate Republican candidate John James will join us live next hour. Don't miss that. And what did the voters think of President Trump's rally last night? Todd Pyro is having breakfast with friends in Illinois. We're going to check in with him next. Looks like he's having a good time. He's taking some orders.
Now to some quick headlines, Hollywood edition. LeBron James is taking a shot at politics, arriving in San Antonio donning a Beto for Senate hat. The Los Angeles Laker weighing in on one of the most heated Senate races of the midterm, supporting the liberal candidate fighting to unseat Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Considering the Lakers are 2-4, maybe he should pay attention there. And funny man Will Ferrell hitting the trail in Georgia, door knocking and recruiting volunteers for Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams.
Hi, it's Will Ferrell up here in Kennesaw State, of course, home of the Owls. We're trying to get people to volunteer with Stacey Abrams.
Abrams is neck and neck with her opponent, President Trump-endorsed Republican Brian Kemp. We'll see if these celebrities weighing in actually works, Ed.
Didn't work out in 2016, you're right, Pete. Since President Trump took office, his administration has given strong support for the U.S. military. You've seen that again and again, even signing an over $700 billion defense policy bill back in August that boosted military pay by the most in 9 years. But what will happen if the so-called blue wave washes over Washington? Let's ask former advisor on military matters for the Hill, Rebecca Heinrichs, now a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we've heard this idea, though, that maybe the blue wave is not all it was cracked up to be. Might that be good news for the U.S. military?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't really pay too much attention to polls. I think it's kind of hard to tell at this point. But if Democrats take back even one chamber, just the House of Representatives, for instance, and gain back the majority, it's going to be much more difficult for President Trump to get through his agenda. And that includes a sufficient spending, funding, and resourcing our national defense. Democrats are going to try to obstruct a lot of what the president is trying to do. And Democrats tend not to prioritize and invest in the military like Republicans do. Democrats tend to look at things like health care, Social Security, the things that are actually ballooning federal spending. So that's what we're looking at here. If the Democrats take back even just at the House, we're going to have a hard time getting through a good, sufficient defense spending bill.
And that's not just political rhetoric. These are the facts as you lay them out. And I wanted to show our viewers what the Congressional Progressive Caucus, what their military blueprint is. This is what they say if they'll take back the House. They vowed a very different path from the president. They will cut the Pentagon budget. That's pretty clear. Eliminate overseas contingency spending and, quote, achieve smaller force structure through gradual attrition. This is what the president said was happening under President Obama when he took office, and that he's wanted to reverse. That General Mattis came into the Pentagon and said, people are not going to like it, but we got to spend money and build the military back up with all these threats from around the world.
That's right. And the thing is, nobody disagrees that we have a ballooning debt. It's just that it's Social Security and it's health care and it's the interest on the debt that is actually driving the debt. It's not the military. The military, national defense is a priority. This is what Congress is supposed to do, number one, before we do anything else. And so if we actually are going to engage in fewer wars and deter these big wars from countries like China and Russia, we have to invest in not only military capabilities that we have in greater quantities, but also invest in the technology so that we can be superior, not on par with, but superior in all warfighting domains, including in space. That requires money, and we got to fund that first before we fund anything else.
You mentioned investing in our men and women in uniform. You've got investors in Wall Street thinking about cold hard cash, if you will, and they want to know who's going to control the House, who's going to control the Senate. And we looked at it. Credit Suisse put together an analysis of what's going to happen to shares of weapons manufacturers. They say if the Democrats take the House, it'll be down by 2%, down 3% or more if Democrats win both the House and Senate. And then here you have shares of weapons manufacturers under the Republicans up 3% or more if the Republicans can retain control in 2018. That's the view from Wall Street. And I wonder, though, wouldn't critics say that's because there are a lot of Republicans who want to make money off of building up the military? How would you respond to that criticism?
Yeah, I would just say, again, this is the government's first responsibility. You know, we always hear complaints about the military-industrial complex. They're just in it for profit. Of course, you're going to have companies that are trying to make money, but we use these technologies to ensure that the United States, again, is the world's superpower, and so that we're not having to engage in constant